The Brood is a 1975 cult horror classic, which is considered by some to be one of the best movies made by David Cronenberg. It was also written by him, and the movie has a story, plot, and feel which is very unique compared to other movies that I've seen, both within and apart from the horror genre. Now, although there are a number of characters in the film, many of whom are very entertaining, who come in and out of the movie at various times, you spend the majority of the time and emotional investment with three primary characters. Now, the main protagonist in the film is a relatively young father, played by Art Hindle, and his wife, played by Samantha Agar, has recently undergone some mental issues for which she has been institutionalized under Oliver Reed's character, who is basically the top brass at this institute, who tries some interesting alternative methods of helping his patients. And it has varying degrees of success from patient to patient, a few of whom you meet throughout the film. And in fact, some of the best characters and best acting in this film is from those mentally disturbed patients. I really enjoyed those side characters' performances in particular. Now, without spoiling anything, the plot of the film revolves around that essential concept, but what drives the film is Art Hindle's daughter, because he finds that she has been hurt, and he believes that it's his wife who has done so. And basically, the story progresses from there, and gradually throughout the film you visit various characters who have been a part of their lives, but especially the life of his wife in particular, who she may bear some animosity towards. And people in the film start getting attacked by strange creatures. And as far as the plot goes, I'll leave it there. As far as the overall mood of the film, I personally find older films to be sometimes hit and miss as far as the mood and the fear factor. If it's done right, it can be really nostalgic and have a creepiness, in my opinion at least, that many modern horror films just can't match. On the other hand, they could be very easily poorly acted and camp. This film is not. This film is actually a really good classic, and although its initial reviews were somewhat mixed, financially it was, interestingly, a success, running from what was at the time only a $1.5 million budget. Now, one of the things that I like the most about this film is the mood. I would classify some films as having a scary tone. I would classify others as having more a creepy tone, something like The Babadook, for instance. This film, and some others, I would classify more as having an eerie tone. It's not necessarily scary or intimidating, but there's something off about everyone and everything in the film. Something is so close to reality and the way it should be, but the fact that it's not quite right is unsettling. And this film gives off that kind of vibe, which some other movies do as well. Kind of like when you see a robot that's almost like a human, but not quite, and it gives it that intrinsic creepiness. This film has that kind of attitude and mood to it. And that mood was actually what I enjoyed the most about this movie. Now, as far as the individual reviews, I'm going to give the story and the plot of The Brood overall a 6. Because although it's not necessarily the most complex of stories, it does require, say, 2 viewings at least to really follow everything that's going on. The first time you watch it, you enjoy it in a certain way. The second time, you notice so many more things, and things slot into place and make much more sense. So overall, I'm going to give it a 6 in that regard. As far as the characters and their motivations, I'm again going to give it a 6, because most of the characters in the film play a really good role. Samantha Agar and Oliver Reed in particular give really good performances, even though they're not in the film as much, especially in the case of Samantha Agar. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the characters that I like the most in the film are the side characters who play these mentally disturbed patients. They were really entertaining characters, and the only character, funnily enough, who I sometimes didn't quite like as much as I would have wanted to, was kind of ironically the main character played by Art Hindle. Even then, though, he's far from being a bad character. He's just a little bit flat sometimes compared to the bombastic, over-the-top characters that everyone else is portraying. Overall, though, I am giving it a 6 for the characters and their motivations. And next up, of course, we have the visuals and overall effects. Now, there are some practical effects used in the movie, and when they are used, they're pretty good, but some of them aren't quite as good as you might like, and that is kind of due to its age, in part. Many films from back then had kind of hit and miss special effects, and this suffers from that a little bit. Certainly not as bad as some do, but it's kind of there, and it's more towards the earlier part of the film that I would say that's the case. So overall, for the visuals and effects, I'm going to give the film again a 6. As far as the audio and the soundtrack of the film, I'm actually going to give it a 7, because the music is, again, eerie. It's almost got a flow to it, but at the same time it's kind of off. There's something not quite right about it, and it works really well. The sound in general of older movies has kind of a crispness, and the technology that they seem to use back then to capture film and sound seemed to be kind of more sensitive or edited in a different way to the way it is now, which kind of made all the noises louder. Even the faintest whisper in an old movie is much louder than most people mumbling in modern movies. So overall, I'm going to give the sound and audio overall a 7. It was very good. And finally, for the most personal, of course, of the 5 categories, the rewatchability and entertainment factor for me personally. And for this film, I'm going to give it a 6 in that regard, because it's the kind of movie that I have watched a couple of times, I will watch a couple of times again, but it's not the kind of film which I would recommend for everyone, and it's not the kind of film which you could watch over and over and over again for the most part. Some people certainly could. It's that kind of movie that if you love it, you probably really do love it. But for me personally, it's not quite that level. I enjoyed it. I will watch it again. But it's not one of my absolute favourites. So overall, it's a 6 from me. And that means that overall, our tabulated score is not quite as high as some other horror films in my selection, but still not a bad at all 3.1 out of 5 tabulated score. And my overall verdict of The Brood from 1979 is that if you haven't seen it, as quite a few people still haven't, definitely check it out if you're into, of course, horror, and if you're into movies which are eerie, and perhaps for some people, weird and slightly creepy as well. But overall, that's it for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.